Welcome to another episode of the MMA Lockcast. I'm your host, Manpreet, aka MMA Lock of the Night, and your boy on Twitter at MMALOTN. This week we go over UFC Vegas 20, headlined by Ciyrl Gane and Jairzinho Rozenstruik, another heavyweight battle, the third heavyweight main event we've had in the last several weeks. And this is an important one too, especially for Ciyrl Gane, who's taken his first ever main event in the UFC. Jairzinho, on the other hand, has had a couple main events to this point, but this is definitely a spot where Gane should rise to the occasion and put on one of his best performances. But you guys will find out more about that in the breakdown later on this podcast. Great card from top to bottom. You know what I mean? I'm really looking forward to what comes to the table here. We got like Ankalaev versus Krylov on this fight, Menifield versus Knight, which should be a great fight. Alexander Hernandez versus Thiago Moises. That's a great fight. We did have Cowboy Oliveira and Randy Brown fall off. That was a fight that I was very much looking forward to. But also, Jimmie Rivera versus Pedro Munhoz. That's a great fight. And Dustin Jacoby versus Maxim Grishin should be a fun fight too. So very much looking forward to this card. We had Hani Barcelos fall off as well too, within 24 hours of his fight being announced against Marcelo Rojo, I believe the guy's name was. But yeah, great fight regardless, or a great card overall regardless. I'm really looking forward to it. All right, before we get into the breakdowns, obviously I like to go over my UFC betting recap because we don't hide from losses here. We don't yell at people and argue with people about our losses. We talk about our losses, we put our head down, and move on to the next event. But not without talking about it first, because your boy transparent. There's nothing you guys can ever bring at me that I'm a fraud or anything like that. Your boy brings transparency 101 no matter what. So that's kind of my focus here. So we'll go over this last event. We'll start off with the dog of the night play, or we'll start off with the hits. 1.5 units at plus 120 on Jared Gordon. That cashes for plus 1.8 units. I believe a lot of people were just buying too much into Donnie Chavez's fight against TJ Brown, completely disregarding everything that Jared Gordon has done in his UFC career thus far. And we see, a great performance from Jared Gordon, albeit he missed weight by 4 pounds. Can't really control something like that, especially after you've already made the bet. So good win for Jared Gordon there to get back on track, to string together 2 wins. The other win that we had was John Castaneda. I had 1 unit on a parlay of him and Jamal Emmers. We obviously know what happened with Jamal Emmers. He pulls out pretty much as Chas Skelly is in the octagon. And then it turns into a 1 unit on Castaneda at minus 122. Big win for him there. 0.82 unit profit on that pick. And then it was just the yellows, right? We had, this is the one that I regret the most. So I had a 1.5 unit parlay on the under 1.5 of Alexei Oleinik versus Chris Daukaus. That obviously hits. Probably should have been the lock of the night play too. And then we had Vieira parlayed with them at minus 280. So that parlay was 1.5 units at plus 118. Absolute lazy and horseshit bet for me. I mean, that's the one that I will absolutely say that not one of my prouder bets. And it's not even a lock of the night play, but it's one of those where I'm just like, let me get a slightly better line on the minus 165 on the under 1.5 on Daukaus and Oleinik. That was a great price tag regardless. Why the hell did I want to try to make it a better line by throwing Vieira in there, who just, missed weight, so that didn't look good either. And that fight was obviously closer than it played out to be, or than the odds indicated. So very, very lazy approach for me there. I'm very disappointed in myself in that aspect. Super bummer there. Then we lose minus 2.5 units on the under 2.5 of the Rosa and Minner fight. Minus 160 was the line on that. I know a lot of people that were on that line. In the end now, it seems like a bit of a trap line. A lot of people are reading into the Derek Minner side of things. 22 of 25 victories via submission. And then combined, I believe it was 45 of 53 fights hit the under 2.5. So that was about an 85% hit rate. And the odds at minus 160-ish were implying a 63% hit rate. So you're getting solid value if you're just talking about statistics. Unfortunately, that one whiffs there. Then the lock of the night play, 4 units on Curtis Blades to win inside the distance at minus 167. I still believe that was not a bad bet. I'd probably make that bet again I truly believe it was like a 80% favorable matchup for Curtis Blades in terms of going out there and doing what he does. And he showed another wrinkle in his game, which was an improved stand-up game where he was able to just stay on the outside and pick apart Derek Lewis. And I kind of wish that he just stuck with it, right? Maybe he was just kind of scared about the pressure and potential blitzes coming his way from Derek Lewis if this fight had remained on the feet. But he just runs into an uppercut and gets knocked the hell out. So the 20% outcome of Curtis Blades getting that knockout came to fruition. That's a variance for you. That's a high variance spot a low variance spot in an MMA fight. And Derek Lewis definitely has the power to put out anybody's lights. So yeah, that one sucks. That one kind of hurt, but I'm not as mad about that loss as I am, the Mike Rodriguez play or the Prachnio and Roundtree under 1.5, or what was before that, the Munir Lazez one, right? Like I've made the changes in terms of not investing heavily on bum fights and picking a high level guys to go out there and do my work. And I picked Blades. He's a high level guy, still a top 3 guy in my opinion. The low variance thing just played out like Kamaru Usman last week, right? Or the week before that, I should say. High level guy, got caught early in that fight, survived in it, and then went on and won in that 3rd round. So I'm backing high level guys, and that doesn't change for this upcoming event. So let me just put a bow on the recap. Minus 5.38 units on that play. That brings us down to, minus 17 units on the year. We got about 5 events under a belt, or 6 events under a belt at this time. Plenty more year to go, but I've definitely learned from my mistakes in January, and I regret nothing other than playing Ketlin Vieira as part of my parlay. That's the only thing I regret from this last event. Everything else I'm completely fine with. I'm completely fine with losing the under 2.5 and that Rosa and Minner fight. All the statistics and numbers and stylistic matchup things that you wanted were all there. And the Curtis Blades thing, it was all there. Everybody got duped by Blades. So maybe the under 1.5, or sorry, the under probably would have been the better play, but it is what it is. I'm okay with it. We're moving on. We got a great card coming up again, and I already got a couple plays in mind. Not in mind, but I have a couple bets placed, and I have a couple more that I'm probably going to be releasing throughout the week. So shout out to everybody on the Patreon that already knows what those plays are. As you guys know, the plays will drop for free on Friday, but if you don't want to wait that long and the odds might change in that amount of time, you're more than welcome to sign up for the Patreon. The link is in the description below. $5 a month. You guys get early access to the breakdowns that you guys are about to see. You guys get all my picks, obviously, the best bets and props article, a Discord community that's just very lively, very helpful, and very friendly. Love the guys that are in there right now. Shout out to anybody that's watching the podcast that's a part of the Patreon crew. And then we have a couple other perks there. So just check out the link in the description below. Everything's there. Secondly, coolbet.com. Make sure you guys go sign up with them if you're in Canada. Also, it seems like there's a bunch of Scandinavian countries that are involved with that as well. The link is not the link, but information is in the description below. But if you guys go to coolbet.com, sign up using the bonus code MMALOTN2, that's the number 2, you guys will get your initial deposit matched up to $200, 100%. Matched up to $200. So it's a great website. They got great odds. You can parlay props. They have great live betting, and something that I just recently found out. You can live bet as the fight's going on. So not just in between rounds, but as the fight's going on, you can live bet. And that's a great, solid tool. So make sure you guys go check out live bet. Once again, the bonus code is MMALOTN2. All right. That's pretty much a wrap. I got my Patreon plug. I got my betting recap. I got my Coolbet plug. Let's get into the breakdowns. Appreciate you guys watching. Again, last thing. Subscribe and like below as well too. That really helps. If you're watching this on YouTube, helps your boy out a lot. Make sure you guys hit that like and subscribe. Appreciate it. All right, let's get into the breakdowns, and hopefully we can win you some more money this weekend. Dustin Jacoby versus Maxim Grishin. We got minus 185 on Jacoby and plus 160 on Maxim Grishin. Let's start off on the Grishin side of things, who's coming off a victory over Gadzimurad Antigulov. That was a fight where I had the under 1.5. And we didn't get the Antigulov in round one that we normally get. For some reason, he was just going out there and biding his time for some reason, thinking that that's going to change the outcome of the fight. Then the second round starts, and that's when we see the vintage Antigulov going forward, landing a takedown, but not doing a good enough job in terms of keeping his opponent down, letting his opponent get back to the feet. And then by that time, Gadzimurad, Antigulov is just absolutely huffing and puffing. And we see Maxim Grishin go out there and just put it on him, right? Just overwhelms him with volume, with pace, with pressure, and then eventually it just puts away Antigulov late in that second round. There was about 2 or 3 seconds left in that second round. Either way, it probably would have been done early third round as well too. So bummer that I missed on the under 1.5 there, but Grishin went in there and did exactly what he should have done. Before that, we saw Grishin have his UFC debut against Marcin Tybura, and that was after he had had a couple stints in the PFL and came up short in terms of winning the entire tournament. But the Tybura fight, you see the size difference, right? Grishin is a big light heavyweight, but Marcin Tybura is a legit heavyweight. So, heavyweight. So we saw Tybura, pretty much bully him that entire fight. Get a couple takedowns, push him up against the cage, land some good shots from distance, but we didn't really see Grishin have the best performance that night, right? For some reason, it seems like he's content with just pretty much staying on his back foot, letting his opponent kind of pressure him and push him back, and that's not really what you want to do against a guy like Dustin Jacoby, who's really going to be able to put it on you with the striking, leg kicks, high kicks, whatever the hell it is. Dustin Jacoby definitely has the ingredients to make it a living hell for Maxim Grishin. Now, going into the tape for this fight, it was a fight that I'm like, oh, there's probably some solid dog value on Grishin here, considering that he has a wealth of MMA experience, whereas Dustin Jacoby, as of late, has mainly just been focused on kickboxing and glory kickboxing and all that. But when you really run the tape, you see that Jacoby is very efficient with the strikes, right? Solid calf kick, which really rendered Justin Ledet useless in their fight, and he was able to finish him relatively quickly. And then even in the Ty Flores fight on the Contender Series, just putting it on him. You could have stopped that fight on multiple occasions, but Ty Flores was just hella durable, hella gritty, and just had a ton of heart, and pretty much just saw that fight through. But this fight against Grishin, I think that Grishin is going to have trouble kind of closing the distance, getting his paws on him, clinching up with him, and even getting to the ground, which is probably where he has his best advantage. I think that Jacoby's just going to be able to kind of light him up on the feet, start off with those calf kicks, keep him on the outside. He's a big dude himself too. He's grown a ton of confidence in his striking, and it's definitely been showing over his last several fights, which is where I think that he's going to have the massive advantage over Grishin here, who's just a little bit too slow, good all-around MMA fighter, but doesn't really shine particularly well at one specific martial art. He has a good top pressure, he has some good wrestling, but I feel it's something that Dustin Jacoby will be able to, retaliate against and kind of just be able to shuck off the takedowns and keep this fight at range where he'll be able to unload those leg kicks, notably those calf kicks, and it's going to start to slow down Grishin, and we'll see, Grishin continue to accept the back foot just as he does in most of his fights, and we'll see Jacoby kind of, I don't know if it'll be a decision. It could potentially be a KO as well too, maybe a TKO. But Jacoby's just been looking so good as of late. It's hard to truly go against him, even at the plus 165-ish line that Grishin is currently at. I like Jacoby. Personally, I'd like better odds on him too as well. I'll probably stay away from this fight, but I'd maybe peek the Jacoby inside the distance line. You know what? Let's just check that out live on the podcast right now. Jacoby. Oh, and they released it. Thank God. Jacoby inside the distance, we got plus 175. Not too shabby. Grishin is quite durable. The last time we actually saw him finish, so he lost to Marcin Tybura by a decision. The last time he got finished was in 2016 when he got knocked out by none other than Mr. Co-Main Event himself, Magomed Ankalaev. So it's going to take a guy like Ankalaev to kind of put out Grishin. But then again, just kind of skimming over his resume between Ankalaev and coming to the UFC, nobody really jumps out of the page that has the striking acumen of a Dustin Jacoby. So maybe Jacoby could find that finish of his own again. Maybe that plus 175 is going to be some solid value, as I do think that Grishin, he's just going to... I believe he'll accept that back foot. I believe Jacoby will be the one kind of moving forward, using his jab, using his leg kicks, and really kind of diminishing the game of Grishin, and really won't be able to get him going. So I At the minus 185 line, I'm staying off the money line, but the inside the distance is definitely intriguing at plus 175. So I'll go with Jacoby to win this fight via second round TKO. Ronnie Lawrence versus Vince Cachero. We got minus 155 on Ronnie Lawrence and plus 135 on Cachero. Let's start off on the Cachero side of things, who's coming off a loss to Jamal Emmers in his UFC debut, but you can't really fault the dude, right? The guy came in on short notice, came up a weight class, fighting a much bigger guy, and especially when you watch that fight, you see the difference in size and weight, and seeing that Jamal Emmers just absolutely had him covered pretty much everywhere in that fight. But you can take small things out of that, right? One thing that we saw from Jamal Emmers was solid distance striking. You know what I mean? Good kicks up the middle, combinations from the outside. And that's kind of the Ronnie Lawrence game, right? Just stay on the outside, kick as much as possible, try to keep your opponent on the outside. And then when you want to, go in for the takedowns. And you can't really compare the wrestling of Jamal Emmers and Ronnie Lawrence. Just, again, you got to take the size into consideration there as well, too. But I do think that Ronnie Lawrence shows great fight IQ and is able to complete takedowns when he needs it, but also to secure rounds if it's required. But Vince Cachero looks like a solid striker, some good leg kicks as well, too. Seems to throw a lot of heat in his punches, but I think that he's just a little bit on the weak side when it comes to the grappling in the wrestling realm. Like, we do see decent hips from him every now and then, but in most of his fights, he is giving up takedowns, and Ronnie Lawrence does a really good job in terms of mixing up his strikes with his takedowns to kind of keep his opponent second-guessing themselves whether they should be going in on a strike, whether they should be countering, whether they should be sprawling. Ronnie Lawrence does a good job of mixing all of that stuff up. I'm trying to find a good reason to back Cachero here. I do believe he has the hand advantage, like the boxing advantage here against Ronnie. And I do think that if he stands his ground and really lets his strikes go and kind of just counters every time Ronnie Lawrence crashes forward, he could have some success. One fight that this kind of reminds me of is the Viviane Araujo fight and Jessica Ai, where we saw Araujo playing on the outside, and every time that she closed the distance to try to get her strikes off, we saw Jessica Ai just respond by standing her ground and throwing a combination in return. And I feel like that's the method that Cachero is going to have to take here, as I don't think that he's just going to be able to track down Lawrence. Lawrence does a good job of continuously moving, circling, landing his spinning kicks, landing good shots down the middle, good body kicks as well too. And then again, when he needs it, he's able to shoot. And I think that with the amount of physical overload and action overload that Ronnie Lawrence is going to be throwing at Cachero, I think he's going to have a tough time kind of reading what's coming next and where it's going to be coming from, and whether it's a takedown or whether it's just a feint that he's going to end up following up with some punches and some good kicks as well too. So I'm on the Ronnie Lawrence side. I'm not so keen on going out there and betting him at minus 155. Maybe if this was closer to a pick'em line or something, I'd feel a little bit more inclined to be on the Ronnie side. But I just have no interest in betting this fight, as we could see a possible improvement from Vince regarding his second fight in the UFC. Whereas Ronnie Lawrence, I feel like we will see improvements from him on a fight-to-fight basis. One thing that I like from him is that we see him jumping around to a lot of different gyms over his career, but most recently, he's been spending time at Sanford MMA, which is a solid spot. Originally, he's from Nashville, and I believe he's fighting out of a Nashville MMA team down there, but Sanford MMA must have done wonders for him, right? Like, you see guys coming out of Sanford MMA that are having just absolutely phenomenal performances, and performances like they've never had in the past before. Notably, Phil Hawes that we saw last time go out there and win a decision. Never went to a third round ever in his life, and then he goes out there for the first time going to a third round and winning a decision in his career, right? So there's those instances where Sanford MMA can truly take these guys to the next level, and they might be able to do that for Ronnie Lawrence here, who seems to have a very clear path to victory and a very effective style too, right? It's hard to track this guy down. He moves so well, and anytime that you try to close the distance and try to corral him, he gets some shots off, he gets his kicks off, he keeps you at distance, or he just counters with a takedown of his own. And more often than not, it seems like he's completing these takedowns. So I like what we see from Ronnie. To be honest, I feel like his last opponent was a little bit more threatening. I think the guy's name was Jose Johnson. Jose Johnson, the guy that he beat on the Contender Series there. And I believe he came in as an underdog as well too. Yeah, he came in as a +2. Plus 260. Is that plus 260? Yeesh, kabish. Yeah, plus 260 underdog according to Topology. So that's you see the ever improving game from Ronnie Lawrence there, and I think that's what he's going to be able to do here. Mix up his kicks, mix up his movement, and then get a couple takedowns, and I think he should secure himself a decision victory. Alonzo Menifield versus William Knight, and this fight is pretty much a pick'em. We do see Alonzo Menifield as a slight favorite at most of these bookies as well too, but no higher than like minus 115, minus 120. So let's start off on the Alonzo Menifield side, who's coming off a two fight losing streak, both of those being his only ever losses in his career. And definitely a wake-up call that he required, especially getting away with the ways he's been winning in his prior fights, right? The Deshaun Boatwright fight, I believe that was an 8-second fight. Vinicius Moreira, the guy had nothing to give to him on the feet, and Alonzo Menifield was able to make him pay and get the knockout there. Paul Craig, same thing, was able to get him out of there relatively quickly. Now, the Devin Clark fight, a lot of people expected Menifield to go in there as a minus 230 favorite and absolutely starch Clark. But Clark did a good job of, keeping this fight in the clinch areas, keeping this fight, skin to skin so that Menifield couldn't really get his shots off. And then by the time Menifield, got into the third round, most of the energy and pop was really off of his shots. Whereas, Devin Clark continued to move forward, kept the pressure on him, and did really, really good work. You do have to give Menifield some props in that fight, though. We did see him keep the fight on the feet for the most part, shuck off a bunch of takedowns, and Devin Clark was just left, trying to pretty much clinch fuck him and get a bunch of control time and win the fight that way. And he was successful in doing so. Against Hovin St. Preux, we just saw Menifield show, it was a tough fight. We saw OSP, pretty much on his bicycle the entire time. I was happy to catch OSP in that fight at that plus 140 range. But we saw OSP continuously moving, even though Alonzo Menifield was the one moving forward for the most part. But we saw him ripping that kick up the body. And from that southpaw stance, we saw OSP just absolute butcher the body of Alonzo Menifield with that front kick up the middle, and it was landing pretty much at all times. In that second round, there's an instance where there was like 15 or 16 unanswered strikes from OSP, against Menifield, where he just kept ripping the body, and Menifield just didn't know how to close the distance. Didn't really know how to put his punches together and seemed quite lost out there. And that's very unfortunate to see from a guy, especially from Fortis MMA, under the tutelage of Saif Sayoud, as you believe somebody like that would be able to, have a plan B if things really weren't going their way. But, it could have been the cardio. It could have been the fact that Menifield just really didn't know how to close that distance effectively. And those body shots were definitely adding up. So you don't want to take too much away from those as well, too. Now, Menifield, we know his game, right? He moves forward. He likes to throw bombs. And more often than not, his opponents fall before him. But when they're not, things get a little bit sketchy, as we saw in his last two fights against Clark and OSP, right? Also, talk about a beautiful counter from OSP to put Menifield's lights out. Beautiful, beautiful finish there from OSP. Now, William Knight, on the other hand, we're talking about a fighter that's 9-1. His only losses to Tafon Nchukwi, who's in the UFC now as well. Almost a similar style where he was just going out there and absolutely battering these guys on the feet, showing that he could still finish guys later in fights too. I believe the Rocky Edwards fight is one that went into the third round. Still got to finish there. But that second round was pretty much an entire stalemate, as we saw Rocky Edwards on the back of William Knight, and William Knight just holding on for dear life with on that one arm of Rocky Edwards, pretty much keeping his stalemate. No damage done, no real work being done from either guy. So we saw William Knight come out in that second round and look much better, look cleaner and crisper, and landing the beautiful one to drop Rocky Edwards on his butt. Then we saw William Knight come into the Cody Brundage fight. That was the Contender Series fight. And Brundage gets the takedown, gets his back almost immediately. And we see a similar thing like we saw in the Rocky Edwards fight. We saw William Knight just holding onto that arm, and Cody just could not get it out. The referee, Cody eventually tries to move, especially from the instigation from Herb Dean in terms of threatening him that he's going to put them back on the feet. And then we see William Knight take advantage of that transition, get back to his feet, and then Brundage right back in on a takedown. And we see William Knight ring down those Travis Brown style elbows and get the finish there. The Alexa Camor fight, that was a very solid fight and a good showcase that we saw from William Knight. And that's the type of fighter, or that's the type of fight I want to see from guys like a Tom Aspinall, right? I was kind of shitting on Aspinall the other week, saying that we've never seen him in the second and third round have solid cardio. Then he goes out there and proceeds to finish Arlovsky within the first minute of that second round, but it still doesn't answer my questions, which seem like Tom Aspinall slowing down a little bit in that first round, and I'd like to still see how he looks in round 2 and round 3. Whereas William Knight, we've seen him, in a grueling fight, a clinch-heavy fight, both guys wearing on each other in the cage. But in that second round, we saw William Knight land a beautiful takedown, beautiful trip takedown. In the third round, same thing, saw him land a beautiful trip takedown, and then doing some good work from on top, maintaining that position. Will he be able to get Alonzo Menifield done? I'm a little bit skeptical about that. I'm not 100% sure. Given the fact that Devin Clark couldn't get Menifield down, hold him down. I'm not sure if Knight will be able to do the same thing. I do think though, if this fight does play out in the grappling and clinching round for the most part, I gotta give the slight advantage to William Knight. I feel like he'll have more power and he'll have more cardio as well too, to at least last those 3 rounds and really just continue to put the pressure on William Knight, on Alonzo Menifield. Now a lot of people might say, okay, this fight, take the under 1.5, somebody's going to go to sleep. But we often see when two guys that have heavy power go up against each other that sometimes they just stalemate. And, one guy might just control the clinch realm and the grappling realm and they end up winning a decision victory, right? Similar instances as of late that come to mind is like Marcin Prachnio versus Khalil Roundtree, Michel Pereira versus Chaos Williams. Like, it doesn't necessarily mean that both guys that are knockout artists are going to go in there and try to knock each other out. There's got to be a level of respect from both sides, and both guys might be like, okay, I don't want to get knocked out, but I do want to play this fight as safe as possible. And from what I've seen in the cage thus far, I would have to lean the William Knight side of things because he seems a little bit more aggressive when it comes to the clinch game. We've seen him do some good damage from on top. That is, if he's able to get Menifield to the ground. I think the later this fight goes, obviously it's more live for Knight to get him to the ground. But yeah, I lean Knight. In terms of power, it's almost a wash. Explosiveness is on both guys here. Size is slightly on the Menifield side, who's 2 inches taller. 3 inches taller. William Knight, 3-inch reach disadvantage as well. Yeah, I'm on the William Knight side here, but I just don't see myself playing it. Like, if we get a crazy number on the over 1.5, I'd probably look at that. But outside of that, this fight, I'm gonna stay away from. Maybe on DraftKings, it might be a solid play on either side, considering there could potentially be a knockout. But I would not be entirely surprised if we see this fight go 15 minutes. So maybe even looking at that fight goes to decision line might be something to look at. But I do like Knight here. I think he'll be able to control the positions more. I think his chin and durability will hold up. And, I think Menifield is truly one of those guys that will be knockout or bust every time out. And I think that William Knight will just have more in the tank at this point in time and has definitely showcased more to us in his past fights. So I'll go on the William Knight side of things. Again, though, I will say, if he does end up on his back, things could get a little bit iffy, but I'm not entirely sure or sold on what the top game of Menifield is like and if he'll truly even be able to hold a guy like William Knight down. We did see William Knight get held down by Jamel Jones, but that guy was definitely a weight class above, took that fight on short notice, and was holding down William Knight pretty easily. And then once we saw the next round start, we saw Jamel just absolutely gas out. William Knight landed a bunch of bombs, and Jamel actually absolutely tapped out in that fight. So durability, longevity, cardio, I lean William Knight. And I think that's all, like, that main X factor is going to be all it takes for the guy to get their hand raised. So I'll be going with William Knight, and I'll go with, I'm going to say decision. I can't believe I'm saying it, especially for a fight like this, but I'm going to say decision because I think that we'll see this fight play out similar to the Alexa Camor fight, where we see these guys just clinch up time and time again. Nobody gets a real shot off enough that will knock the other guy out. And maybe see William Knight get this fight to the ground. The only thing that gives me pause is the fact that Devin Clark wasn't able to get the takedown, but we'll see what kind of game that William Knight's able to bring here and if he's able to get Menifield to the ground. So I'll go with William Knight to win this fight via decision. Alexis Davis versus Sabina Mazo. We got minus 240 on the Colombian Sabina Mazo and plus 200 on the Canadian Alexis Davis. Let's start off on the Alexis Davis side of things, who hasn't fought since UFC 240, which was still the night that Max Holloway defeated Frankie Edgar, if you guys remember, up there in Edmonton. She drops a decision to Viviane Araújo, who obviously has been looking very good as of late. That's on the tail end of a 3-fight losing streak that she's currently on. Her fight with Jennifer Maia before that went to a decision. Very close fight. Could have gone either way in my opinion. We did see scores on both sides there, but we did see some good things from Alexis Davis in that fight too that pertains to this upcoming fight against Sabina Mazo. And then before that, she drops a decision to Chookagian. Very close fight. But the interesting thing about all three of these fights that she's lost, she's just slightly outstruck her opponents in those fights, significant strikes especially. So very intriguing how that panned out. But still, obviously, those women, a little bit younger, a little bit more crisp, and did enough damage in those fights. The Jennifer Maia fight, we saw her do a good job of pushing her up against the cage, landing a takedown, and even doing some good damage from on top, and accruing a good amount of control time as well. In the Viviane Araújo fight, we saw her, not doing the greatest in the first round. The second round, Araújo lands a nice takedown, but, a little bit too lazy on top. And we see Davis pull off a sweep, and she ends up pretty much on top of her for a full half round. Solid work from Alexis Davis there. And then in the third round, the speed and the agility and the strength and the youth of Viviane Araújo really shone through in that fight, in that round specifically, and she was able to pull away with that decision victory there. But Alexis Davis, 36 years old, still shows some solid traits as a fighter now, right? Like she has improved striking, but obviously not like nothing crazy, especially to the level of Sabina Mazo, but enough to at least be passable. And then she still shows good good pressure, good forward movement, and just moving forward. I think that's very positive for her, especially in this fight against Sabina Mazo, where she's really going to need it. She shows good control up against the cage, and when she gets her opponents to the ground, again, she shows great control from on top, which I think is going to be very important here. Another thing that I like that she does very well is that she catches kicks very well and is able to at least push her opponents to the ground and then, again, accrue that top time, which she's so good at. I believe she's a black belt as well, too, so that definitely helps. Now, Sabina Mazo's side of things, right? She's 23 years old, which is absolutely crazy to believe considering that she's had a couple fights in the UFC now. I do want to confirm that number. I don't know why that feels like it's off yet. She's 23. She'll be 24 in March. But yeah, she's still young, trains at King's MMA, I believe, doing some good work over there. She dropped her UFC debut, which is her lone loss in her professional career. But that's where a fight where we saw Marina Moroz, just dominate in terms of the grappling and control time and was able to really nullify what was coming back from the Sabina Mazo side of things. The Dobson fight, we saw Sabina go out there and put on her wrestling singlet and get down Dobson pretty much the entire fight and do some good work from on top, securing that decision victory. The J.J. Aldrich fight, right? That was another close fight. That could have gone either way as well. It was like the forward movement of J.J. Aldrich against the volume of Sabina Mazo. I think J.J. Aldrich did some good work on the feet as well, too, and did some good damage of her own. But obviously, the judges were seeing the volume a little bit more from the Sabina Mazo side. And then the Justine Kish fight. That's another fight where we saw Kish, moving forward at all times, landing good leg kicks, staying active enough, getting a takedown as well at the end of that first round. She did a really good job of really putting it on Sabina and pushing it. On two of the judges' scorecards, they gave Justine Kish both of those first two rounds. One judge apparently gave Sabina Mazo the first round. I didn't understand that. And then it came down to that third round where Sabina Mazo was able to land a beautifully timed head kick and then follow up with the submission victory, very much saving her ass there, especially considering that two judges had Justine Kish winning that fight and especially would have secured that decision victory if they saw the final bell there. But, the head kick of Sabina Mazo bails her out in that situation, and she gets her hand raised. But man, that was close, because I had Justine Kish there as well too. I had a bet on her. Plus 180 was a solid spot, especially considering that I believe that fight was much closer given the forward movement and the activity of Justine Kish. Luckily for us, we get another opportunity here with Alexis Davis, who should be able to implement somewhat of a similar game plan to Justine Kish in terms of just pushing the pressure and kind of have Sabina Mazo pretty much backing up the entire time. But mixing the takedowns, mixing the cage work, mixing her ability to catch kicks, given Mazo's knack for kicks and how effective she is with them, I fully expect Alexis Davis to go out there and try to catch some of those kicks and follow up with some takedowns, or even push Sabina Mazo up against the cage and really get her clinch game working as well. I'm not sure why Mazo continues to be such a heavy favorite in most of her fights. Minus 220 against Kish. She was almost pretty much at a pick'em against Aldridge. Minus 150 against Dobson. Hindsight, obviously, that's a bit of a steal. But in her UFC debut, she was a minus 165 favorite against Marina Moroz. But here, people think that maybe that Alexis Davis is past her time, and that may be true. But even past her time, I think that she could give issues here to Sabina Mazo in terms of taking her down and controlling her. And that's the main thing about Mazo's game, is that she gets controlled pretty easily at times. Now, she could be making improvements. You definitely got to give her that benefit of the doubt at 23 years old. But given that we haven't truly seen those improvements inside the cage, plus 200 on Alexis Davis does not really look that bad. And then that's the side that I'm going to be leaning with here, as I do think that Davis will be able to withstand the striking of Sabina Mazo. Her durability is there. I think that her, zombie-like approach to most of her fights, backed up with her improving striking, will allow her to go out there, get these takedowns, close the distance, keep Sabina Mazo on the back foot, and hopefully, allows Davis to stay away from the knockout power that Sabina Mazo may have, or at least, the head kick that she showed against Justine Kish. I'm really hoping that we can see that shine through here for Davis, and then continuously push this fight against Sabina Mazo, push her up against the cage, get a couple takedowns, maybe land some good ground and pound, and take home a decision victory. And that's how I see Alexis Davis getting this done, is just pressure, pressure, pressure. And that's something we can almost guarantee that we're going to see on a fight-to-fight basis from Alexis Davis. Mix that all in with the amount of experience she has. 29 fights. 29 fights. This is going to be her 30th fight, whereas Sabina Mazo has a third of that experience. Only 10 fights. This is going to be her 11th fight. Again, super young, going up against a tough, grizzled veteran. But a lot of people like to count out Alexis Davis, and not to mention the fact that she's on a 3-fight losing streak. I understand it, but if you look at this fight from a stylistic standpoint, it makes sense as to why Davis should be able to get her hand raised, and which is why this fight should be much closer lined. That came out very weird. I feel like this fight should be closer than what the odds indicate. That's what I'm trying to get across to you guys. So at plus 200, I think we're getting a solid amount of value on Davis here, given her style and how she should be able to pressure Sabina Mazo, keep her off of her game, stay away from the big shots, and then really just win this fight off of control. And I think that Davis could do that very, very successfully. And especially at plus 200, we're getting some good value. So once again, I'll go with Alexis Davis to win this fight via decision. Alexander Hernandez versus Thiago Moises. We got minus 190 on Alexander the Great and plus 165 on Thiago Moises. Let's start off on the Alexander Hernandez side of things here, who's coming off a dominant victory over Chris Gutzmacher last time around, where he came in as a minus 470 favorite and did exactly what a minus 470 should do. There were a lot of people kind of counting him out in that fight, myself included. Not saying that he wasn't going to win, but we're questioning where he was at in his career. And it seems like he made the better choice, which is to change camps from that San Antonio area where he was currently training, or where he was training at the time, and now training up there in Denver, Colorado at Factory X Muay Thai. And he's really emerged himself within that crew. one thing that I like about him is that within the first couple months of moving to that gym, he was already ready to travel to Fight Island to just corner a couple of the guys, Brandon Royval being one of them. So we're really seeing him adapt that team mentality, not being that one-man solo show anymore. He's going out there and he's really being a teammate, and it feels like he's really turning a corner in terms of his maturity. We're talking about a guy who burst onto the scene, who just knocked out Benio Dariush relatively quickly and already was thrown straight to the wolves, right? Olivier Aubin-Mercier at that point in time was already an established guy within the UFC, whereas Alexander Hernandez was just a young, spry kid who knocked out a top 10 guy relatively quickly. And, he gets the win over Aubin-Mercier, outstrikes him, gets over 7 minutes of control time as well, too, shows off his complete MMA game and not just going out there and just starching a guy in the first round. And then he runs into Cowboy Cerrone, which was that vet lesson that he needed to really change his game around. The Trinaldo fight was a weird one, right? That was one where we just almost nothing happened. So it's almost like we couldn't really chalk anything up to that. Maybe he got a little bit of that hometown rub as well, too, as I believe that was that UFC San Antonio card. Now, and then after that, he goes out there and fights Drew Dober. Striking looks great. Don't get me wrong. His striking looked really good. Unfortunately for him, he was going up against a better striker, a more, a lifelong-ish striker in Drew Dober, at least more than Alexander Hernandez was doing at that point in time, right? Not to mention the pace and the pressure that Dober was putting on him was eventually going to break Alexander Hernandez, right? Just staying in his face, throwing the combinations, not letting him breathe, targeting the body. Just great overall performance from the Team Elevation alum, Drew Dober. So great performance from him there. And then we see Hernandez change camps, go over to Factory X Muay Thai, put his career in Mark Montoya's hand, and he gets a great performance against Chris Gruetzemacher, where his striking, he just could not miss. Like every strike he threw was on the button, and that's a little bit of a testament to the improvements in the confidence of Alexander Hernandez, but also Chris Gruetzemacher, stylistically, he's a little bit of a punching bag when he's going up against a guy who's athletically that much better than him. And that's exactly what Hernandez was that night. But I feel like this is another tailor-made matchup for him here in Thiago Moises, who jiu-jitsu guy who has decent striking capabilities, but is definitely going to be slower to the punch, is not going to be able to put on the type of pressure that a Drew Dober did, nor will he be able to sustain that over 15 minutes. And I feel like this could look closer to how Thiago Moises versus Michael Johnson did in that first round, where he's just getting pinned up. And I think that's what exactly Hernandez will be able to do here. He's going to, again, much quicker striker. He'll be able to put those combinations together before Thiago Moises even knows what happened to him. Again, Moises, decent striking, decent head kick as well, too. I believe he has a couple of head kick knockouts on his record. But it's going to be tough for him. Obviously, the better wrestler here, Alexander Hernandez. So if Thiago Moises wants to take this fight to the ground, I think he's really going to struggle in doing so. And even if Hernandez does decide to take this fight down later in the fight, I think he'd be able to survive in the guard of Thiago Moises, who, in my opinion, is starting to look a little bit more overrated in that grappling realm. He's 25 years old, so maybe still making a little bit of improvements. Great ATT alum as well, too. A great training camp behind him. On a 2-fight winning streak. But let's not forget, that Michael Johnson fight for 5 minutes, he was getting lit up in that first round, possible 10-8 there, and then Michael Johnson has a complete misstep and gets heel hooked early in that second round. And then the Bobby Green fight, super close, questionable fight IQ from Bobby Green at the end, especially trying to, jump for that Kimura and then ending up on the bottom, and Thiago Moises, gathering more control time, gathering some more damage, and then winning the judges' scorecards there. Say what you want about the decision, Bobby Green always fights close in his fights. Thiago Moises did what he could to keep that fight as close as possible, and he got his arm raised that night. However, Alexander Hernandez is just another athletic beast. I think his cardio will hold up. I think his striking will hold up. And I think it's going to look really, really bad for Thiago Moises. I wouldn't be surprised if we see another Alexander Hernandez finish. I mean, I doubt we see him go out there and try to grapple fuck Thiago Moises right off the bat. I think he's going to go out there and lay it on him. His movement, his striking, everything is just going to be much more crisp than what Thiago Moises will bring to the table. And I think Moises is really going to start to fade probably halfway through this fight. Maybe at the tail end of the first round, we'll see him start to get demoralized. Being at such a speed disadvantage, at a strength disadvantage, it's going to be really tough. Now, the way that Thiago Moises wins this fight is, if he successfully gets it to the ground, like I just don't see him putting the combinations together to give Alexander Hernandez trouble. I don't see him being able to put on the pressure that's really going to break Hernandez the way that Drew Dober did. You know what I mean? Drew Dober, not only did he have the pressure, but he had the striking to back it up. Thiago Moises has decent striking, but just not to the level of a Drew Dober. So that's where my pause comes here for Thiago Moises. Plus 165 seems like a decent price tag on a guy like Thiago Moises, but you're bringing in a reinvigorated Alexander Hernandez, who looked amazing in his last fight. Again, a little bit of an asterisk there considering his level of competition, but you got to believe that the Factory X guys are just doing such great work with these types of guys. Now you have a guy in Alexander Hernandez, his athleticism is off the charts. He's already skilled. He already has all the skill sets that he's bringing to the table. And now you have a mastermind like Mark Montoya that's able to craft it and make it a much better product. And that's what we saw in the Grutzmarker fight. And I expect to see even more improvements as his career continues training up there in Denver. Again, only 28 years old. Still has a ton of room to grow, has a wealth of experience under his belt now, especially after that big Benio Dariush knockout and how his career transpired after that. But I think that's what he needed to really shake his head up a little bit and get back right on the right track. So I do like Hernandez here, and I do think he has a solid shot of going out there and just putting it on Thiago Moises. Again, I'm recording this on the Saturday before the event, or Saturday before the fight, so a week before, and we don't have props right now. So I'd be very interested to see what Hernandez via KO is, as I think that's a very solid spot here. We haven't seen Thiago Moises knocked out in the UFC, but this is the first time, in my opinion, he's fighting a striker that has the power and the pop of Hernandez. Like Damir Ismagulov is a great fighter, in my opinion, potential top 5 fighter who just isn't active enough. But Ismagulov is more efficient with his strikes, right? He's more of a point fighter, I'd say, whereas Alexander Hernandez is going to be looking to take your head off if he's not looking to grapple fuck you, which I don't think he'll do here, at least not early in this fight. But again, Hernandez is going to put the pressure on him, and I think he's gonna break him, and I think he's gonna knock him out. So I'll say Hernandez probably by. I'll give Moises a little bit of benefit of the doubt that I think he'll be able to survive that first round, but I'll say Hernandez to win this fight via second round KO. Alex Caceres versus Kevin Croom. We got minus 210 on Caceres and plus 175 on the hard-hitting hillbilly Kevin Croom. So Alex Caceres actually opened up at minus 225, got down to 235, and I was up to minus 210. And I think people are starting to get a little bit more privy to who exactly Kevin Croom is. But let's start off on the Bruce Leroy side, who's coming off a 3-fight winning streak now. That's wins over Steven Peterson, Chase Hooper, and Austin Springer, who stepped in on short notice for Giga Chikadze. I'd be very interested to see how that Chikadze fight would have went for Bruce Leroy. Methinks not the greatest, but he did go out there and defeat Austin Springer in a very solid manner as well too. We saw Springer dive in for a takedown and perfectly countered by Caceres with a nice little uppercut that kind of stunned him, and then he followed up with a rear naked choke that got the victory there. Before that, pulled off a solid upset over Chase Hooper, who a lot of people were high on, thinking that if Caceres was getting choked out by the Kron Gracies and the Jason Knights, that automatically Chase Hooper was going to be able to do the same thing. Caceres proves them wrong, does a good job of keeping the fight on the feet and pretty much just keeping Chase Hooper at range, and even did mess around a little bit on the ground, and was safe enough to cruise home to a decision victory. So good win for him there. Now going up against Kevin Croom, I think he's just getting a lot of love from the recent 3-fight winning streak that he's on, but Kevin Croom offers up a lot of tough spots for him here. We know Caceres, he needs his range to really get his game going. His kicking game is really good. Solid speed, very unorthodox approach to his striking. He throws a lot of spinning stuff, a lot of flying stuff. Has some solid jiu-jitsu as well too. But I truly believe that once he gets space and his opponent allows him to kind of operate at that distance, at that kicking distance, he's pretty much on cruise control and he can take home a decision victory. Unfortunately for him, he's not getting that in Kevin Croom here. I think that Kevin Croom is very live to go out there and spring the upset here, and that's by just moving forward, landing some good shots, maybe get a couple takedowns if he's feeling frisky about it. But I do think that most of his success will come from just pushing the pace on Alex Caceres. Kevin Croom has a solid gas tank. We did see him go 5 rounds before he came into the UFC against Anderson Hutchinson, taking home the FAC title that night. But he has a solid wealth of experience as well, too. We're talking about a guy that has over 33 fights coming into his 34th fight. I believe, well, this will be his 35th fight since that no contest for the Roosevelt Roberts fight. Again, the guy stepped in on short notice, popped for marijuana. Could you really blame the guy? Like, I feel very bad that he got that loss taken off his record. But apparently rules are rules. But he came into that fight as a pretty significant underdog to Roosevelt Roberts. I think it was around the plus 350, plus 375 range. And he lands a big bomb right to begin with and then follows up with the power guillotine choke that Roosevelt Roberts just was not able to get out of. So very solid performance there from Kevin Croom. But it was only 31 seconds, right? How much could we really learn from that 31 seconds? Luckily enough, for Kevin Croom, we have a wealth of tape available on him, and you can see him going out there and showcasing that pace, pressure, and cardio type of game that we normally see from him. You wouldn't expect, solid work from a guy with the nickname hard-hitting hillbilly, but James Krause has done a really good job in terms of rounding this guy out to be a very good MMA fighter, and especially that pace and pressure, man. I'm going to continue to bang on that throughout this breakdown, as I believe that's his path to victory here. And he has some solid volume as well, too. It's not just he's just moving forward. He's actually throwing strikes, elbows, punches, kicks, and he has a solid Muay Thai clinch game as well, too, where he's able to rain elbows on his opponent's head and do some good damage from there as well. If he wants to go for the takedown, I believe the takedown is there for him, too. I do think he has to mind his P's and Q's a little bit, being on the ground with Bruce Leroy, but I don't think that it's something that he hasn't seen in the past before. He does have, I believe he has more fights. Yeah, he does have more fights here than Alex Caceres, and he's been fighting some solid competition on the regional scene, right? Anderson Hutchinson, again, somebody that I highly rank. John Makapa Teixeira, who's a Bellator veteran. Derek Minner, he's fought on the regional scene as well, too. Matt Bissett. Solid names that he's fighting throughout his career and, getting wins over some of these guys as well, too. So I do rate Kevin Croom, and I do think that he's a solid underdog spot here, too. I wouldn't even be surprised if he should be a favorite, too. Yeah, I mean, given his style, I don't think he's going to give Alex Caceres the room to operate to really get his game going. So I'm on the Kevin Croom train here. I think that he even springs the upset via decision here. I think he's a solid spot. Plus 175 is currently where his line is at, and the line is starting to dig down. So if you're on the Kevin Croom train, I think you get on it now, because I think the more people that start to look into this fight, the more people will be like, oh, I should probably have money on this underdog. Like, it's almost starting to remind me of Sung Woo Choi the other week against Yusuf Zalal. I missed the train there. I don't think I'm going to miss a train here on Kevin Croom, who deserves to be, much closer. This should be a pick 'em, if anything, as I do believe that Kevin Croom has all the chops, not to mention the solid head coaching of Mr. James Krause and Glory Kickboxing, or Glory MMA, I believe that they're called. Glory MMA and Fitness is their name. But Kevin Croom's doing some good work over there, and I'm sure he wants to get back onto the winning track with his last fight going to a no contest. So I got Mr. Kevin Croom to win this fight via a decision. Angela Hill versus Ashley Yoder. We got minus 300 and rising for Angela Hill and plus 240 for the Spider Monkey Ashley Yoder. Now, this is a rematch from a fight that happened in 2017 at the Ultimate Fighter 28 finale, I believe it was, but it was the night that Michael Johnson welcomed Justin Gaethje to the UFC, and we got a spectacular fight between them. But Angela Hill came out ahead in that fight against Ashley Yoder, where she was able to, keep the fight on the feet for the most part. She did get taken down a couple times, but again, did spring up to the feet and did some good damage from the striking realm, especially with her kicks, and that definitely gave her the advantage and the victory that night. In terms of recently, though, actually, that was, I do want to touch on this. That was the second stint for Angela Hill in the UFC. If you guys remember, she was on the Ultimate Fighter 20, had a couple fights, went on a 2-fight losing streak to Tisha Torres and Rose Namajunas, who was only 4 fights deep into her career at the time, gets cut from the UFC, goes down to an Invicta, wins 4 fights, including capturing that Invicta title, and then comes back into the UFC, I believe on short notice, against Jessica Andrade, and she drops that fight. The next fight for her was against Ashley Yoder. Now, since Angela Hill has been back in the UFC, her record is now 6-7, which is a little bit salty, but a lot of people will say that she probably deserved the victories against Claudia Gadelha and Michelle Watterson. But Angela Hill has nobody but to blame but herself, and everybody can tell her that. She always fights close to her opponents. She never really changes up her game much. She always has volume, but her opponents are always able to land good shots in return, maybe more damaging shots, more shots that are more impactful in the judge's eyes, whereas Angela Hill just continues to do the same thing, right? She normally is the one kind of marching forward and stalking her opponent and landing some good shots from the outside, but she still eats shots in return, and it may look worse on the judges in the judges' eyes than it does for other opponents. Now, in her last fight, she did have a main event against Michelle Waterson. They were taking that fight, or at least that main event slot, on short notice since Alexander Rakic Glover Teixeira and Thiago Santos were not able to go that night. But we saw them ready to go 5 rounds. Michelle Waterson had already been 5 rounds several times. Angela Hill had been to 5 rounds a couple times as well. But we saw Michelle Waterson, pull ahead in that fight. There were a lot of different scorecards on that from all 3 judges, but they did unanimously give it to Angela Hill in that fight, to Michelle Waterson. But that was one again where we saw Angela Hill marching down Michelle Waterson doing a good enough job in terms of landing counter strikes and landing strikes of her own. Not to mention getting a takedown here and there and doing some good damage from on top, as well as accruing a solid amount of control time. And that's where I kind of lean on here with Ashley Yoder, who, back when they fought in 2017, she was a purple belt. And she's just been working her butt off, and now she's a black belt. So I feel like if she does get this fight back to the ground and back to the positions that gave Angela Hill some fits, she might be a little bit more disciplined and be able to keep that top position and not really let it get away from her like she did in that fight against Angela Hill the first time around, right? We saw her fight Miranda Granger last time around, and I believe she dropped that first round, and then the second and third, we saw her truly start to come forward, get the takedowns relatively quickly as well, too, and even enough to get a 10-8 on pretty much all 3 judges' scorecards in that third round against Miranda Granger. So Yoder is improving on a fight-to-fight basis, though. Now, they both still have salty records, 12-9 for Hill, 8-6 for Ashley Yoder, but I think that Yoder being slightly younger at 33 years old, 36 for Angela Hill, I think this fight should be much closer in terms of odds. Now, I'm not talking about like pick'em or minus 150 or something like that, or like a minus 120, minus 125, but I still give Ashley Yoder roughly like a 40-ish% chance of winning. Plus 300 would indicate that she has a 25% chance of winning, and I think that's a little bit too optimistic, especially if you're an Angela Hill backer. We know she fights close fights. Why are you willing to pay the chalk on a woman that fights close fights like this? And I don't care if they, fought each other in the past and Angela Hill beat her that time. It wasn't a blowout by any means. Ashley Yoder still shows that she kind of have the chops to go out there, take her opponents down, use her size and her strength against them. She's gonna have a 4-inch height advantage here, as well as a 5-inch reach advantage. I think she will be able to close the distance here, bully Angela Hill up against the cage, get her to the ground, not to mention showing off that work that she's been doing at Dan Henderson's training camp. A lot of the work that you see on her IG and some of the footage that's being released is her working up against the cage, working up against the wall, trying to get takedowns from there. But that's her game. Get that black belt going. And I'd be surprised if we see Angela Hill keep the distance consistently for 15 minutes. So yeah, you bet your ass I'd be willing to take a little bit of a sprinkle on Yoder at plus 300. Now, I will take Angela Hill to win this fight, as I do think that she should be able to keep this fight on the feet for the most part and really land some good damage from the outside. But I'm not counting out Ashley Yoder. If this was a 50-50 fight in terms of the odds, I'd probably lean Angela Hill here in terms of making a bet on her. Or actually not even a bet, but at least saying that okay, this is a fight that Angela Hill should win. But at the odds that are currently indicated, and again, they're only going to get worse. I only expect them to get worse as the fight week goes on, as I believe that people are going to continue to parlay Angela Hill in this spot, and I think that's going to be a very bad mistake. I think that Yoder is live here. If she hits plus 300 on one of my books, I'm going to have to at least take a 0.5 unit stab. There's just too much value there to pass up, given the improvements that we've seen from her, given the fact that we've still seen Angela Hill getting taken down in her fights. Most of her fights, she's still getting taken down. That's a concern for me. And against a solid black belt like Ashley Yoder, I think Angela Hill could be in some issues and maybe struggle to get back to her feet. But, from what we've seen in her last several fights, she is able to get back to her feet. She's able to do some good work and kind of make up for that control time that she gave up, which is why I'll predict Angela Hill to win here. But from a betting perspective, I'd be on the Ashley Yoder side. And that's the side that I would probably make a bet on. Again, only a half unit play here, especially at plus 300. You don't need to risk too much to make at least a good little a bit of coin there, and that's the way I'm gonna be looking to approach this fight. So I'll take Angela Hill to win this fight via decision, but don't be surprised if you see me with the Ashley Yoder ticket by the time this fight goes down. Jimmie Rivera versus Pedro Munhoz, and this is a rematch of a fight that happened several years ago now. I want to confirm actually exactly when that fight had taken place. That was in November of 2015, and that was the second fight in the UFC for one Jimmie Rivera. And in terms of odds, we got roughly around minus 140 for Jimmie Rivera and plus 120 on Pedro Munhoz. So if you guys remember that first fight, it did go Jimmie Rivera's way. For some reason, it was a split decision, but it seemed like it should have been a unanimous all around. Jimmie Rivera pretty much won every single round. I didn't see how much damage Pedro Munhoz truly put out there. He did hit him and hurt him a couple of times, but I feel like the majority of work that Jimmie Rivera did in that fight was, much more than we saw from Pedro Munhoz. We did see Jimmie start to slow down slightly in that third round, but he still was able to do enough, in my opinion, to win that round. But since that fight, we've seen him put together a better game. His cardio has definitely improved, and we see him able to go out there and fight for a full 15 minutes without showing as much of a compromised gas tank as we saw from him in that first fight. Now in his last 5 fights, he's gone 2-3, but but those losses, not the worst in the world. He gets head kicked by Marlon Moraes 33 seconds into the fight. I'm gonna chalk that up to just absolute shit luck in terms of that's the only time we've seen him finished via strikes. Usually he's a quite durable individual. Then he goes out there and loses to Aljamain Sterling via decision. And that was a very weird fight where we saw Aljo right off the bat just start shooting for takedowns. He went 0 for 7 on takedowns, but he did manage to accrue a decent amount of control time. And in that amount of time, he really seemed to just disrupt the timing and the game of Jimmie Rivera in that fight. And we saw him kind of just go out there and stay within kicking range, land a bunch of kicks from distance, get a couple of shots off in terms of strikes as well too. But overall, it was just a very frustrating matchup for him. And you could see it, especially when he goes back to his corners and he verbalizes that to his corner and his coaches. He's just like, I feel off today. I'm not on my game, blah, blah, blah. And I think it's not just because of him being off of his game, but it was due to Aljamain Sterling going in there and just disrupting his flow and the type of fight that Jimmie Rivera normally brings to the table. So great work on Aljamain Sterling's part to go out there and actually give that type of fight and disrupt a game of Jimmie Rivera, who is known to be a pretty reliable fighter who can go out there and get his strikes off no matter what's happening in that fight. But yeah, that was a very tough one for him. Then the Petr Yan fight. I think that's a fight that a lot of people need to go back and watch because that was a much closer fight than history seems to perceive it as. Like that first round, pretty much winning that entire first round up until getting dropped at the end with like 15 seconds left. So he gives up that round. I get it. A knockdown. The second round, I'd say a little bit stronger of a round for Petr Yan, but still very close round up until the point that Petr Yan knocks him down again right at the ending of the round. And that third round, I thought Jimmie Rivera did enough to actually get the judges' nod there, at least for that third round. But yeah, that was a very close fight. Probably the closest fight we've seen bantamweight champion Petr Yan in up until this point in his UFC career. So I still think that Jimmie has it, and that was only 2 fights ago. We're talking about June of 2019, so over a year and a half ago at this point. But I truly think that he's still one of the higher level guys at this weight class. Then he goes out there and he beats Cody Stamann in July. And that was somewhat of a weird fight in terms of being short notice. This fight happening at 145 pounds, and Cody Stamann, coming off a quick win over, not a quick win, but a pretty decisive win over Brian Kelleher right before that. And he just jumped right back into the cage and got his game going again. But some people want to call that fight a close fight. That was a clean 30-27. The only reason it seemed close is because Cody Stamann's out there just dry humping him up against the cage, not able to get him down. I think he completed 1 takedown. I do want to confirm that number though, but you know, he made it close just because he was clinching onto him the entire time. Okay, Cody Stamann completed one takedown out of 5 attempts. So he went 20% on that one. Jimmie Rivera actually completed 2 takedowns of his own, but still landed a total of 90 strikes compared to the 62 that were coming back his way from Cody Stamann. And Cody Stamann did accrue close to 4.5 minutes of control time, but very, very minimal damage. And during that control time, he's the one getting hit by Jimmie Rivera, who was defending the takedown, but also dishing out damage. So that was a clear 30-27 all around, in my opinion. I think the best moment for Cody Stamann in that fight was when he landed that flying knee. I think it was close to the end of the second round. But yeah, that was a clear fight for Jimmie Rivera where he did enough damage, defended enough, and was able to go out there and get the dub. Now, if people want to compare that fight to what we're going to see with Pedro Munhoz, I think they're going to be sorely mistaken. Like, when have you ever seen Pedro Munhoz, just clinch onto dudes like that and just try to hold them and overpower them? I don't think that's his game plan. That's not what he's like. He's a black belt in jiu-jitsu. His main go-to move is the guillotine, but we don't really see him going out there chasing takedowns. Like, he's one of those... I'm trying to compare. Like, there's always those jiu-jitsu guys that are super high level on the ground, so they just throw caution to the wind when they're on the feet because they don't mind getting taken down. Because normally when you go out there and start throwing all these heavy strikes and you force your opponent to, try to get out of that situation, they normally shoot for a takedown. And in doing so, they leave their neck out there. And Pedro Munhoz is a master of snatching up people's necks. How he's going to grab the neck of Jimmie Rivera here, that non-existent neck of Mr. Stocky Jimmie Rivera, I don't think that's going to happen. We saw Pedro Munhoz try to clamp onto it in their first fight, but Jimmie Rivera did a really good job in terms of getting out of those positions, exploding out of those positions. The guy is a little ball of energy, and he has very good Muay Thai skills as well too, which is where I think is going to be the difference maker here. Pedro Munhoz, I like to call him, like, with all due respect, I like to call him the walking punching bag, because he brings that style where he's just marching forward pretty much at all times, trying to throw heat in every single one of his strikes. Tries to change it up every now and then in terms of throwing calf kicks, but that's something that Jimmie Rivera is very privy to. He throws a lot of calf kicks of his own, and he's a Muay Thai specialist, so you don't really see those calf kicks working on guys that actually, are well-versed in that realm. Like, it's going to work against a wrestler, it's going to work against a boxer, but in terms of a Muay Thai and kickboxing guy like Jimmie Rivera, just like we saw when Mark Diakese fought Rafael Fiziev, Fiziev was more than privy to the calf kicks and was able to check them and make it a lot more difficult for Mark Diakese to get his game going. And I expect the same thing here if Pedro Munhoz wants to go out there and try to, really get the leg kick game going or the calf kick game going. I think he's going to get checked. I think he's going to get countered. And I think we're going to see Jimmie Rivera get the better of the striking exchanges, which is what this fight will come down to. I'd be very surprised if we see Pedro Munhoz land a takedown. And I'd be very surprised to see this fight take place on the ground at any point in this fight. I'm expecting Jimmie to go out there, do his Muay Thai thing where he's landing combinations from range, landing some good kicks, and then doing a very good job of pivoting off after he throws his combinations to nullify the amount of damage that is coming back his way. I am very confident in this pick. I really, really like Jimmie Rivera here. Again, the only real knock on his fight and in his game and the possible path to victory for Pedro Munhoz is if he knocks out Jimmie Rivera, just as Marlon Moraes was able to. But I don't think that we'll see that. I think that was more of an anomaly for Jimmie Rivera. Like, he got knocked down twice by Petr Yan, but his senses were all there. Like, Petr Yan is able to put dudes out, but Jimmie Rivera ate them, got dropped, but was still able to come back and continue fighting. And even after getting dropped in those first 2 rounds, he was able to go out there and have a very good third round against Petr Yan as well too. So, Pedro Munhoz, good fighter, but I think he struggles against guys that technically have a better advantage, are technically better than him on the feet. And I think that Jimmie Rivera is miles ahead of him on the feet, and that's where this fight is mostly going to take place. And I think Jimmie Rivera still has high upside in terms of one day fighting for a title. He's only 31 years old, still getting better, getting in some good experience. Fell a couple times against Moraes and Sterling and Jan, but those are high-level losses. And again, that Petr Yan fight being as close as it was, I truly think that he can make it competitive if they were to fight once again. So I like Jimmie Rivera here. I don't even mind the decision prop, which I currently think is around plus 120. You guys know me. I don't really like overs or playing decision props, but I I went over my history of decision prop bets that I've made, and I had Jimmie Rivera over John Dodson 2 units at plus 150 by decision, and thankfully that one came through for me. It might be another approach that I'm looking at here, but I do like the line that we're getting regardless. Like, I believe if I do want to confirm this number, but the implied odds. So let's say like the bookies that I'm using, we can get Jimmie Rivera around minus 138, minus 139. But just for the sake of this podcast, let's say he has a minus 140 is what his line is. The implied odds there are 58% for him to win. Personally, I think it's the only way for Pedro Munhoz to win this fight is if he knocks out Jimmie Rivera, and I think that's a very low percentage to hit. So I'd put Jimmie Rivera all the way up to even like 70%. I believe he has that good of a chance of winning this fight, which would put him roughly around that minus 230 range. So yeah. I think people might be reading too far into this, which is why Pedro Munhoz should win this fight. But I like Jimmie Rivera pretty much at all points. He's going to go out there. He's going to go out, strike him. And I think he's going to make it look easy too. So I got Jimmie Rivera to win this fight via decision. Montana De La Rosa versus Mayra Bueno Silva. We got plus 115 on De La Rosa and minus 135 on Bueno Silva. Let's start off on the Bueno Silva side of things. Was coming off a victory over Mora Romero Barella last time around, where we saw her lock up a beautiful submission victory. I believe it was by armbar, and that was after she gotten taken down by Barella. And it seems like the takedown is a bit of the kryptonite to Silva's game. Now she's only 7-1. She's only been she's only lost one time, and that was to Marina Moroz, who took a very similar approach in trying to take her down. Definitely gave away that third round as Bueno Silva was starting to come on at that point in time, but she definitely gave away those first 2 rounds from activity and obviously some top control from Marina Moroz. The Jillian Robertson fight, right? We saw Jillian get her down. Jillian just, got lazy for a second, and we saw Bueno Silva wrap up another submission there. So she does have several submission victories on her record, so it makes you believe that she's truly active off of her back, and she's very live for a submission no matter who the opponent is. Montana De La Rosa, on the other hand, is a solid wrestler. High school wrestling. I believe she did wrestle collegiately. I could be off on that. But in terms of the level of wrestling that she has, she's definitely one of the better women in this division to do so. Most of her victories when she is getting her hand raised comes via her getting the fight to the ground and doing some good work from there. The Nadia Kassem fight, obviously she gets a submission victory there. The Andrea Lee fight, she gets her down, I believe, 4 or 5 times, but Lee does a good job of getting right back to her feet. She has some decent get-up game for sure, unless your name is Roxanne Modafferi for some reason. Again, Mara Romero Barella, another woman that they share a common opponent with, and we saw De La Rosa get that fight down on pretty much on a round-by-round basis and control her from the top position. The Viviane Araujo fight, that one was a tough one for Montana, who took that fight on short notice. Not to mention, the style of Araujo was just a very bad matchup for De La Rosa in terms of her striking. She's very fast twitch muscle as well too, so Montana wasn't really able to track her down, corral her, and get her down. She did get her down once, but not for long. We saw Araujo get right back to her feet, stay constant with her movement, and really caused trouble for De La Rosa on the feet. It seemed like the third round that De La Rosa was like accepting of the fact that she's not going to get this woman down, so she's just going to go out there and start to strike with her. And it's weird seeing the level of confidence from De La Rosa in her hands and kind of the swagger that she was fighting with in that third round, especially with the bloody and beaten face that she was bringing to the table. But we did see her have some success with the striking, but Viviane was just too fast, a little bit too much output, and way more powerful as well too. So you definitely saw the damage on De La Rosa's face in that fight. Now you can almost make a similar comparison in terms of the Araujo fight and Bueno Silva, given the advantage that Silva will have in the striking realm in this fight. However, She's just a little bit more static, though. She's a little bit more. She doesn't bounce around as much. She doesn't move as well as a Viviani, and she's definitely more susceptible to getting taken down. And that's where I think that we'll see De La Rosa shine, is getting the takedowns and really doing some good damage from on top. She has a solid cardio. She has a solid gas tank as well, especially now working up there in team elevation. I think they're definitely going to have her prepared and ready to go for a hard 3 rounds if required. Now, obviously, the concern also here will be the potential jiu-jitsu game of Bueno Silva, right? She has a ton of submission victories, and if De La Rosa wants to get this fight to the ground, she's going to have to really mind her P's and Q's in terms of making sure that she doesn't get caught in a submission. Now, the only submission loss on De La Rosa's record is Mackenzie Dern. So that's not really too bad. She's managed to survive on the ground against other women as well too that are pretty good with their jiu-jitsu game. But to the level of Bueno Silva, it's hard to tell at this point in time. Jillian Robertson's solid jiu-jitsu player herself too, but always or more often than not overextended herself at times just to get the finish. And then unfortunately for her, she gets finished as well. Mara Romero Barella, she did get submitted by Courtney Casey not too long before that. So, seeing the women that Bueno Silva is able to submit, obviously it's a little bit of an advantage for De La Rosa, knowing that she's survived against some solid women on the ground. And the only person to tap her to this point is Mackenzie Dern. So, yeah, I do lean with the dog odds on De La Rosa here. And, I backed her in a ton of her fights. I'm pretty sure she was a lock of the night play for me against Kasem and Barella, and then I did have her on at dog odds against Leon Araujo. But this seems like another solid spot that she should be able to take advantage of the lack of takedown defense on Bueno Silva's part. I think that with her having the size advantage, 1 inch height advantage, as well as a 1.5 inch reach advantage, and again, working with the guys over there at Team Elevation, they're only going to get her game even better and better. So I truly believe that we'll see her on a time and time basis get Bueno Silva down, do some good work from on top. And we saw Munhoz truly successful with that, and I think we'll see De La Rosa successful as well too. I assume that this line might get wider and wider, as I do believe that there is some love out there on Bueno Silva, but I do think that De La Rosa wins this fight. I think she just gets it down, rides the top position out, stays out of the submissions, and again in that third round, if she's not able to get the takedowns, I think she has good enough durability to at least survive it, a la Marina Moroz in that fight as well too. So I'll go with the De La Rosa side of things here. I do think she'll have the advantage in terms of the power, the wrestling, the durability as well too. I'd kind of be surprised if we see Bueno Silva finish her with strikes. There is obviously the slight possibility that she can pull off a submission off of her back too, but I think we'll see De La Rosa play this out very, very safe. So I'll go with De La Rosa. And one more thing, sorry, I do want to talk about the improvements that we have been seeing from De La Rosa in terms of her striking. It's a lot better than when she was coming off the Ultimate Fighter. It's a lot better than that we've been seeing over the last 5 fights or so, and it definitely showed through in the Viviane Araujo fight. Again, she was getting pieced up by the much crisper and much better striker, but she was making a good account of herself, and I believe that she should be able to show some of that against Bueno Silva here as well too. And if you guys remember, she rocked and dropped Mara Romero Barella in the last round of their fight as well too, which ultimately allowed her to just ride out that fight from on top. She was quite offensive from the top as well too, in terms of landing good shots and even seeking submissions at times, but she was playing it very safe as well too in terms of getting position over submission, and I think that's going to be very key for her here against Bueno Silva in terms of not overextending herself, and I think she'll do a very good job of that. We're pretty much seeing her grow up in front of our eyes, right? She's 26 years old now, just turned 26, and she's been in the UFC for several years now, so I think we're going to see a progression in this fighter's career and seeing her get better and better. And again, switching camps to Team Elevations before that Viviane Araujo fight was nothing but solid for her, and I think it's going to work out very, very well for her in this fight against Bueno Silva, and I think she'll come out on top as the underdog. So once again, I'll go with Montana De La Rosa to win this fight via decision. Magomed Ankalaev versus Nikita Krylov. We got -325 on Magomed and +265 on the minor Nikita Krylov. Let's start off with Nikita Krylov, who's coming off a decision victory against Johnny Walker, the first decision victory he's ever won in his career, the second time he's ever gone a full 15 minutes, which is absolutely crazy. But he brought out his singlet. We got Nikki Wrestler that night against Johnny Walker, where he just wanted to stay away from the power of Walker, continuously get the fight to the ground, and did some really good work from on top. Unfortunately, couldn't get Johnny Walker out of there, but did a really good job in terms of securing positions and really sucking the energy out of Walker, really diminishing the knockout power of Johnny Walker that night. And Nikita Krylov did a really good job just staying on top, landing some good work from on top, and staying active enough that the referee would not stand them up. So, nice little change up in Nikita Krylov's game, especially considering, he's had 34 fights. He's only 28 years old. The guy's been around forever, just fighting the who's who. He had his original UFC stint that didn't go the greatest, ended it off with Misha Serkinov choking him out. Then he goes over to M1, I believe it is, somewhere over there in Russia, Fight Night Globals. Has a couple fights over there, even fights Fabio Maldonado, knocking him out. And then comes back to the UFC, and since then he's gone 2-2. The Glover Teixeira fight was the one before Johnny Walker, where, back and forth grappling exchanges, very close submission attempts from either side, but we saw the grittiness of Glover Teixeira really shine through in that fight. I believe he notched 2 reversals in that fight, not to mention a couple of takedowns. I think that was really wearing on Nikita Krylov, and we saw, the gas tank issues that Krylov definitely has, and Glover did a good job of just, always pulling through, always ending up on top, and doing some good damage as well. The Ovin St. Preux fight, that's where we saw the cardio, on the other hand, fill for Nikita Krylov's opponent. You know what I mean? OSP did a good job of staying on top in that first round, landing a takedown, landing some good damage from on top, going for a couple of submission attempts. But then come that second round, you saw OSP absolutely huffing and puffing, and he just was not ready to go for that second round. And Nikita Krylov took full advantage of that. I believe he sunk in the rear naked choke. Beautiful submission victory for him there. It's great seeing that type of improvement from a fighter when it's talking about going up against a specific opponent, right? The first time he fought OSP several years prior, he got Von Prude. And then he comes back and fights him again in his second fight back with the UFC, and he chokes him out in the second round. Now, I do want to chalk that up to the cardio issues of one Ovin St. Preux, but you got to give daps to Nikita Krylov for pulling off the fight the way that he did. The fight before that, Jan Blachowicz, that was his return fight to the UFC, where we saw Blachowicz, get taken down early, reversed, black belt himself too, gets on top of Krylov, and then does some good work from on top, and then eventually in that second round, getting that submission victory via arm triangle choke. Absolutely beautiful work from him there to get Nikita Krylov out of there. Now, how he matches up with a guy like Magomed Ankalaev, who mainly a striker, has some good wrestling chops as well too, has only been taken down twice in his UFC career, both of them by Paul Craig in rounds 1 and round 2. But when we saw him get taken down, we saw him pretty much get right back to his feet. He doesn't really settle too often. He, starts working to get back to the cage, get his back up against the cage, and work back to his feet. But not only that, but he does a really good job of reversing position. And I believe one of those times that he reverses the position, he pretty much lands a takedown from his knees. It was absolutely beautiful, the work that he did there. And then obviously, the last second submission victory for Paul Craig in that fight. That was his UFC debut. The only slip up, literally the only time he just relaxed a little bit, it got taken advantage of. And other than that, he'd have pretty much a perfect career. We're talking about a guy that was 1 second away from being 15-0. So, unfortunate loss for him there. Dominated that fight pretty much from bell to bell until Paul Craig was able to snatch up that submission victory. After that, comes back and absolutely takes that aggression out on Marcin Prachnio, knocking him out. Then puts together a very good performance against Klidson Abreu, where we saw him, use his grappling, use his clinch work, use his striking to really get the game of Klidson Abreu to be off, and he takes home a decision victory there. The Dalcha Lungiambula fight, right? Gets rocked a little bit early in that first round, but makes adjustments almost immediately, and then just controls the entirety of that fight. And then we obviously know the whole Iwan Kutilaba saga, right? The first fight, just absolute blown call by the ref there. And then in the second fight, just No questions about it. You know what I mean? Magomed Ankalaev, absolutely the better fighter, the more technical striker, and he made it show. And he made it show with style points as well too. Now, the impressive thing about Ankalaev's approach in his striking game is that he looks so comfortable in both stances that it just doesn't matter what his opponent's bringing to him in terms of the stance, right? When he's fighting a southpaw, he goes orthodox. Or sorry, he goes orthodox. Pretty much mirrors what am I talking about? It's always the opposite stance that he's going up against. So like if his opponent wants to come orthodox at him, he's going to come southpaw. If his opponent wants to go southpaw on him, he'll go orthodox, and he'll stick with it pretty much the entire fight. Or if his opponent wants to switch up the stance, he'll switch it back up, so it's always an opposite stance. And he's so comfortable in both spots. Like his left is just as strong as his right, and his hooks, his uppercuts, everything from both stances are just on point. I don't think that I can remember any fighter that does it as comfortably as he does. Because I'm like watching the tape and I'm just like, okay, is he orthodox or is he southpaw? And then you see like from the Abreu fight, Abreu's a southpaw, so you see him fight orthodox pretty much the entire fight. And then you see the other fights, and he's fighting in his other stance. It's just so weird, but he does it so effectively. He's very disciplined. He has a 68% striking defense rate because he's very efficient with his strikes. He's very defensively sound, and that may hurt him in the output way of things here, right? Like he's not really landing the most amount of strikes when he's going 15 minutes. But he's definitely landing the more damaging shots. He's waiting for his opponent to give him a little bit so that he can take a whole mile. And that's what he does against his opponents. Guys like Nikita Krylov, who leave all these openings and might be a little bit too reckless on the feet, Ankalaev is going to pick a guy like that apart. It makes absolute sense why Ankalaev is currently minus 325, probably going to come up to minus 500 by the time this fight goes off. Now, the only way I think that Krylov truly wins this fight is if this fight does go 15 minutes, if he's the more active guy. But not only does he have to be the more active guy, he has to make sure he's not getting hit, rocked, dropped, or getting his head popped back so many times that the judges actually end up giving it to Ankalaev. Does he finish Ankalaev? Maybe he throws up a submission of some sort. I don't know. I don't really see that either. Does he knock Ankalaev out? From what we've seen thus far, Ankalaev's eaten some pretty big shots from Kutalaba, from Dalcha Lungiambula, from Marcin Prachnio. Does Krylov have that type of knockout power? I'm not 100% sure. I believe that Ankalaev will be able to walk through him, and I completely understand why he's such a big favorite here. The guy is just so skilled, has a solid wrestling background, master of Sambo, I believe, as well. Some Greco-Roman wrestling in his past as well too. The guy is just so well-rounded. And he trains with a great team. If you look back at his Instagram 4 weeks ago, he's already in Vegas, getting some rounds in with Francis Ngannou for some reason. But then you also see his other training pictures where he's with Javier Mendez from AKA. He's around the Umar Nurmagomedovs, and he's around some of these other guys that are with that camp, with the AKA especially. So I believe that he's getting the best training possible. He has a solid team behind him. He's Dagestani as well too, which is always an incentive. But I truly think that this guy is a 205-pound champion, and I think he's going to be able to run through Nikita Krylov here, who again, solid, chaotic fighter, showed great grappling in his fight against Johnny Walker. Is he going to be able to do that type of work to Ankalaev? I just don't think so. I'd be very surprised if he might be able to land some takedowns on Ankalaev, but I'd be very surprised if he truly controls him there enough to at least win rounds. I don't see that happening. Is his chaotic volume style going to cause problems for Ankalaev? I think it just plays into Ankalaev's game, if anything, right? I think we'll see Ankalaev, pick him apart from range. Even when he blitzes forward, his strikes are so proper. Like his combinations are nice, his uppercut is nice, his lead hook is always good no matter what stance he's coming from. So I think that truly plays into him like baffling his opponents because he's so comfortable from either range. So whether Nikita wants to approach this with the southpaw or orthodox approach, Ankalaev is just going to counter with the exact opposite, and he'll be fine. So Unless Magomed's chin just magically disappears, or if Krylov finds the neck and Ankalaev just really doesn't have any submission defense, I don't see how Krylov wins this fight. Again, volume based is a possibility, but I feel like if he's going to be volume based, Ankalaev is going to find those openings for the counters, and it's really going to cause damage to Krylov, and I wouldn't be surprised if he knocks him out either. So I'm not sure which way I'm leaning with this fight. I feel like I don't know if Krylov will be able to hang with him for 15 minutes, so maybe I'll go with Ankalaev second or third round KO. But I did see his decision prop around plus 315, which not too bad given this new style of Krylov that we've been seeing as of late. But again, it's been very grapple heavy, and I'm not sure if he's going to be as successful as he was against his last two opponents in the grappling realm, especially with keeping it in that realm. I think Ankalaev will be able to kind of nullify that, or if anything, maybe just do some good work from on top. So I'm split between the KO or decision here. I'll go with second or third round KO, but I might have to make a little bit of a sprinkle on that decision prop as well to a plus 300. I think that's a solid spot. Another good spot in my opinion here is the over 1.5, which I currently saw around like minus 125, minus 130. I think that's a good spot too, as I do think that this will be a little bit slower paced than the Kutelaba fight. And given how Nikita's been fighting as of late, I could see it definitely going over 7.5 minutes. But the pick's going to be Ankalaev, and I'll go with Ankalaev to win this fight by, let's say, third round KO. Time for the main event. We got Jairzinho Rozenstruik versus Ciyrl Gane in a pivotal heavyweight clash. We've been getting a lot of big heavyweight fights over the last couple weeks. Alistair Overeem versus Alexander Volkov, and then obviously most recently Curtis Blades against Derek Lewis. And now this is another one where we have a young up-and-comer in Ciyrl Gane who, 30 years old, but in the heavyweight division, that's a young, spry 20-year-old, making, his first debut in the the main event slot. And this is a great matchup for him against Jairzinho Rozenstruik. So as of this recording, which is a full week before the fight is actually happening, it's minus 270 for Gane and plus 230 for Rozenstruik. Let's start off on the Rozenstruik side of things, who's coming off a victory over Junior Dos Santos. Both of them are actually coming off of victories over Dos Santos, but I gotta say that the Rozenstruik one was a little less impressive. It was impressive, don't get me wrong. Obviously, he knocked him out, gets the victory, but I feel like Gane did a little bit better in terms of winning the entirety of that fight compared to Rozenstruik, who, if you look at the judges' scorecards, the two of the three judges gave him the first round, one judge out of the three gave him round one, and the other two gave it to Junior Dos Santos, who seemed to be the more active fighter, which is weird because when you look at the statistics, you got Rozenstruik up there with more significant strikes than him in that round. So kind of weird. Maybe a little bit of miscalculation, but it looked like that Junior Dos Santos was a little bit more active in that. Also, he was the one kind of pushing the pace. He was the one kind of, landing the big leg kicks. And that's why I think the two judges actually scored that round for JDS. But what do scorecards really matter if the guy can put your lights on? And that's exactly what Rozenstruik does. Even in his fight against Alistair Overeem, you know what I mean? That was a fight he was probably going on to lose, and ends up winning that fight with a couple seconds left to go on the clock. So he does have fight-ending power, and that's kind of what he lives and dies on at this point in time. In his last 5 fights, he's 4-1, knocked all of those 4 opponents out, and obviously got knocked out himself when he fought Francis Ngannou in the UFC's return after the whole COVID era. Probably one of the more eerie scenes that we've ever seen in the UFC, not to mention it being like one of the first events outside of that UFC Brasilia event. But there was UFC 249, I believe it was, where we had no crowd, first fight at the Apex, first pay-per-view at the Apex, and you get these two massive monsters, probably the two hardest hitters in the division, going up against each other, and all you see is Francis Ngannou just bull rush the guy, lands his hammer fists, and just absolutely does Jairzinho Rozenstruik. You can hear the thuds, you can hear everything, and even when Rozenstruik hits the ground and hits the back of the cage, you just hear a silence, and it just felt like everybody there just witnessed a murder. It's just absolutely insane. Like, you got to start calling Frankie and Francis Ngannou Frankie Murders, because the guy just goes out there and just puts people's lights out, and that's what Jairzinho Rozenstruik can do as well too, right? The guy has a lot of power in his hands. The combination that he caught Dos Santos with was nasty. He didn't put his lights clean out, but he definitely made his eyes roll back and dropped him, and then followed up with a bunch of strikes. So good on him for doing that, but the approach that he took in that fight leads me to believe that Ciryl Gane should be able to go out there and do, a lot better. And this is stylistically a great matchup for Ciryl Gane. So let's talk about him. He's only had 4 fights in the UFC, finished 3 of them. The only one to come via decision was against Tanner Boser, who's a very tough out. And he pretty much went out there and out Tanner Boser. You know what I mean? He goes out there and outpoints him and wins the way that Tanner Boser normally wins his fights. So it's great to see Ciryl Gane pretty much go that route. We've seen him pull off a couple of submissions. Obviously, the knockout of Junior Dos Santos last time around as well. But the one question mark that I've had about him is how he does off of his back. How he does when somebody actually tries to take him down and is successful with it and is actually a good wrestler themselves. You know what I mean? There was somebody that was going to fight on Fight Island named Antti Delia, I believe his name was, PFL heavyweight. And then a couple days before the fight, PFL was just like, nope, you're still under contract with us. You're not fighting for this on this card. And we're getting like plus 550 on that guy. And I sprinkled a little bit on that for sure. It's definitely worth a little bit of a shot, considering that we've never really seen Gane off of his back. He's only 7-0. His first fight for TKO, which was his first professional fight, was for a title. So they knew this guy had a huge amount of potential. But again, the only thing we haven't seen him really challenged on is that grappling realm. So if he ever gets matched up with Curtis Blades, I'd be very interested to see how that type of matchup would go. Luckily for him, Jairzinho Rozenstruik is a striker. He goes forward and he throws his bombs, but he seems a little bit too patient at times, which is why I think he really let that first round against Junior Dos Santos go. And luckily for him, he was able to put him out in that second round, so he didn't have to worry about the scorecards. Whereas Ciryl Gane, when he fought Junior Dos Santos, great movement, great kicks, southpaw stance, ripping the kicks to the body, ripping the kicks to the leg, staying active enough. His cardio seemed to check out for as long as that fight was going on, bouncing on the tip of his toes, moving in and out very well. So I think he'll do a really good job in terms of staying away from the big strikes of Rozenstruik, and it really diminishes the amount of chances that Rozenstruik has to win this fight. Now, on paper, you could probably say that Jairzinho has a little bit of an advantage when it comes to the credentials in striking. But when you see it play out in the MMA realm and you see the guy who's more active and can, change it up even more, you got to go with Gane. I wouldn't even be surprised if you see Gane go out there and put on his wrestling shoes, take this fight to the ground, and pull off a submission of his own. Now, I know that Jairzinho is not Rafael Pessoa or Dontel Mays, but you still got to believe that he's going to have the grappling advantage here, and not to mention the submission advantage too. So I wouldn't be surprised to see him go out there and take down Rozenstruik as well. Now, if this fight was a 3-round fight like it was originally scheduled to be, because this fight card was scheduled to have Yuri Prochazka and Dominic Reyes headline the card, unfortunately that fight falls through. Now we get these guys stepping in on 5 rounds. But if it was a 3-rounder, I'd probably hit that Ciryl Gane via decision prop, as I think that would have been a solid spot. But this going 5 rounds, I could see Ciryl Gane probably wanting to diminish the amount of chances and the percentage that Jairzinho has in terms of winning this fight. And that could be the takedown. So I wouldn't be surprised if we see him go out there, again, take him down, do some good damage from on top, whether it's ground and pound or looking for a submission of his own. But man, the guy is strong. He's powerful. He's big, athletic. The guy seems to have it all for a guy that could be potential future champion. Again, the only thing we haven't really seen is how he deals with the guy that's going to be able to take him down. Will he be able to get right back up to his feet? Will that suck out his cardio? Again, luckily for him, he doesn't have to worry about that here with Rozenstruik, who doesn't really go for takedowns. Mainly a striker, mainly looking to take your head off. And given the type of movement, and I got to say, I'll come out on a limb here and say I think that Gane has probably the best movement in the heavyweight division, given how big he is, right? The guy just moves so fluidly and smoothly, and is able to get out of the way of big shots. He ate some big shots from Junior Dos Santos as well, too. I'm not sure if he has the knockout power of Rozenstruik at this point in his career, but it's a good sign that he was able to eat those shots and keep chugging forward. So I like Gane. I don't mind the minus 270. More than likely a parlay piece as well too, but I think he wins this fight at least 75 to 80% of the time, given that Rozenstruik's path to victory is very minimal here, which is just seeking that knockout. He's not going to outpoint Gane here. He's not going to outgrapple him, so he's going to have to go out there and try to knock this guy's head off, and I don't think he's going to be successful in doing so. So I like Ciryl Gane here. I'm going to say either I'd be surprised if this actually goes 5 rounds, to be honest. I think we'll see Ciyrl actually grapple a little bit more here. I think we'll see him take him down. I think we'll see him, lay some ground and pound and maybe even pull off a submission here. So either I'm interested to see what the props are too, because the props aren't fully out yet. Again, I'm recording this on the Saturday before the fight. Let's see if they did release anything yet. No props or anything yet on this fight. I'll go with TKO round 3 or round 4 via ground and pound, but if the submission prop is looking nice, I might have to take a little bit of a sprinkle on that as well too. But I'll go with Ciyrl Gane probably by round 3 or round 4 TKO. And those are the breakdowns. I appreciate you guys watching the podcast as always, supporting your boys as always. Make sure you guys hit that like and subscribe below if you haven't already. Check out the Patreon if you guys want to support your boy a little bit more. $5 a month, ton of value for the amount of information, perks, and treats that you guys get. So make sure you guys check that out. And if you want to support me, that's the best way to do so. Also, coolbet.com, promo code MMALOTN2 gets you guys a solid deposit bonus. And yeah, that's about it. Here's to hoping that the lock of the night play comes through and a couple underdogs that I like as well come through, so we can get back on the winning track and start distancing ourselves from the earlier L's in the year and keep this train going. So shout out to everybody. Shout out to the haters. Shout out to the lovers. Shout out to everybody that supports your boy. I really, really appreciate it. And good luck this weekend. And also remember, Thursday, I'll see you guys for the Propping You Up episode on odds at 8 p.m. Eastern. Friday, I'll see you guys for the final weigh-in at 9 p.m. Eastern. I believe Thursday afternoon as well, I'll be dropping that DFS show on Sal Vetri's channel, getting a lot of good responses from that. Shout out to you guys for supporting me on that side. And then obviously on Fight Day, 1 p.m. Eastern, the MMA Lawcast live, as always, taking all your questions, comments, and concerns. Between now and then, I'm sure there's a bunch of shit that pops up, but that's the best way to get a hold of me. I might be doing a Locky late night episode one of these coming days as well too, so maybe look out for that. Turn on your notifications, turn on the subscribe thing, and you guys will know whenever I'm going live. Love doing those. It's a great time, and the community that's starting to be built with that Locky late night thing is just amazing. So shout out to everybody that hops on for that. All right, I'm done. Good luck on your bets this weekend, and I'll see you guys throughout the week.